The boy burned the math answers he had solved in one swift motion, and the professor rushed forward without hesitation. Seeing how disheveled the professor looked, Will suddenly felt a trace of guilt. To him, the problem had been incredibly simple, but to this MIT professor, it had been an unsolved puzzle that had haunted him for years. Will worked as a janitor at MIT, yet he possessed an astonishing gift for mathematics. One night while cleaning, he noticed an interesting problem written on the chalkboard. Without thinking much of it, he casually wrote down the solution. The next day, the entire campus was stunned. The problem had been meant to challenge students. The professor who wrote it had once won the highest honor in mathematics, and even for him, it had taken 2 full months to solve. Curious about this mysterious genius, the professor tried to find out who had solved it, but no one stepped forward, so he issued a second challenge, this time posting an even harder problem. It was one he and his colleagues had spent 2 years solving. Not long after leaving the classroom, he saw a janitor scribbling on the board. Seeing his carefully crafted problem being wiped away, the professor lost his temper and shouted for the man to stop. Just as he was about to chase after him, his assistant called him back. When the professor turned to look at the board, he froze. The messy handwriting contained a perfect solution. At that moment, the professor realized that Will was a once-in-a-generation mathematical genius. However, when he finally found Will, he discovered that Will had been taken into custody after a fight. The professor offered to help him get released, but under 2 conditions. First, Will had to work with him on advanced mathematics. Second, he had to attend counseling sessions. Will had no choice but to agree. For him, math problems were effortless. After reading a question just once, he could quickly write down the correct answer. The professor was overjoyed, but the counselors were another story. After driving away 5 of them in a row, the professor turned to his old friend Sean. Sean was a true expert in psychology. After losing his wife years earlier, he had given up private practice and chosen to teach instead. When Sean learned that Will came from a background similar to his own, he decided to make an exception. The first meeting, however, was tense. Will crossed a line by speaking about Sean's late wife, and an angry Sean ended the session immediately, but he didn't give up. The next day, they met again. This time, Sean didn't talk down to Will. He spoke to him not as a patient, but as a friend.